Welcome to the Stevia Show. It's the Stevia Show. Helping you expand on what you know. Throw in a meme of the week and a review of the screen. And to have a show that covers everything.
Hey, Team Stevia, and welcome to episode 117 of The Stevia Show, a talk show podcast that covers pop culture, world news, local artistry, and everything in between. This is Steven. Lydia is out on business this week, but joining me today is Professor Joe. So how you doing today, Joe?
I'm doing well, Steven. How are you?
Doing great, and thanks for being on. We have a really fun episode today. We're really excited about it, but we would like to thank our previous guests, Josh and Chuck from Z104.5, and that was a really fun interview. Learned quite a lot about the radio and stuff like that. But we're going to go ahead and get our sponsorships out of the way. So funding for the Stevia Show is brought to you in part by the following. Today's episode is brought to you by Bravado Wireless. Bravado Wireless is your go-to when it comes to all things connected. Now that spring has entered the chat, it's time for some spring cleaning, and that might mean it's time to upgrade that old phone. Starting on April 15th, you can get half off a brand new iPhone 12 or Samsung S9 for new customers as part of our new premium data plan. For more information, call your local Bravado Wireless store or head to bravadowireless.com. And we are also brought to you by community members like you. Remember, you can support us on Anchor or Patreon for as little as 99 cents a month. Thanks. So I don't think that we have a meme of the week right now, but since Lydia isn't here, I actually did see a movie. So Joe, have you seen Godzilla vs. Kong yet?
I have not, but
Okay.
I want to.
Okay, gotcha. So so I'll go ahead and review it really quick. So basically the description of the media is legends collide in Godzilla vs. Kong as these mythic adversaries meet in a spectacular battle for the ages with the fate of the world hanging in the balance. Kong and his protectors undertake a perilous journey to find his true home, and with them is Gia, a young orphan girl with whom he has formed a unique and powerful bond. So basically, I think the people who ran the movie knew that it wasn't going to be very good. So they basically threw away character development and stuff like that and just made it all about the big monster fights. So it was pretty good. So I think as long as you don't expect too much from it, you'll be entertained by it. I'd give it a 7.7 out of 10, and Rotten Tomatoes gave it a 75% fresh. So it is worth seeing.
Yeah. That's better than a lot of movies that are expected to be bad. So
yeah, and then like Millie Bobby Brown was in it from Stranger Things, and like I forgot that she was even in the movie and stuff like that because it was mostly about Godzilla and Kong. So
and in the last Godzilla movie, didn't they like heavily emphasize that Bryan Cranston was in it, and he was in it for like a scene?
Right, yeah, he was like billed I think like third or fourth in the in the credits, and then he was in it for a scene. So yeah, because I've seen that one, but not the second one because I think this is the third one of the trilogy. I'm not too certain, but anyway, it was good. So Joe is going to be talking to us today about home brewing mead. So mead is a delicious beverage that we're going to talk about today. So Joe, just to get started, what exactly is mead?
So mead is an alcoholic beverage that is brewed with the primary brewing agent being honey. That's going to be what the yeast feeds off of in order to make alcohol. It's similar in wine making. The primary agent is grapes. In beer, it's oats, barley, hops, and all those kinds of things. For more distilling, which is very, very much different than brewing, but for things like rum, it's supposed to be either molasses or cane sugar, so there's usually some kind of sugary, carby substance that is used for the yeast to be able to feed off of in order to make the alcohol.
Gotcha. So basically, like taste and ingredient wise, it's different from wine and beer because like mead, I feel like, I've had it before, but I feel like it's not as coarse as beer is, if that makes sense. And it's not as fruity as wine is. I think it's kind of like a good middle ground. What do you think?
I would agree. And depending on the level of sweetness to the mead, because there are different levels of sweetness, it's going to be either very sweet compared to either of them, or it's going to be a more dry taste. I think the classifications are like dry, semi-sweet, sweet, and super sweet. And I've done a lot of super sweet and sweet meads, but I think the one we have here is going to be, the first one at least, is going to be a sweet or semi-sweet.
Okay, right on. Cool deal. So Joe, when did you start making mead? And do you do this by yourself, or do you have a friend who does this with you? What's kind of the story?
So I've been homebrewing since I'm wanting to say 2016 or 2017 with a friend I met at work at TCC. I don't want to say any names because I think he wants his name to remain private, but we do all of our homebrewing together. We have been stalled because of the nature of the pandemic, and we haven't been able to brew since probably 2018, 2019 time era. So a lot of these bottles are a little bit older, but in a lot of cases with mead, the longer it ages, the better to an extent. So let's just hope that they still taste good today.
Oh, I'm sure they do. Yeah. So you've been brewing since 2016, 2017. So that's about 5 years of brewing mead.
Ish. Yes.
Okay.
So we've done we did a 3 different 1 gallon batches for our first shot. And then for our second one, we tried to do 3 different 1 gallon batches again. And then we did 2 1 gallon batches for our third attempt, and then we did one that made a lot of the stuff that I brought today, and that was a 12 gallon batch that we split up into 4 3 gallon different flavors that we wanted to try.
Okay, right on. Cool deal. So I guess before we start, I'm going into the tasting, which I'm really stoked for, because I haven't had mead in forever. So tell us about the flavors you brought today, and what's this first one that we have?
So this first one is going to be what's called a typical show mead, which is basically just indicates that the only ingredients that are in it are water, yeast, and honey. There's nothing else in it that is adding to the flavor. I think we use something like 3 pounds of honey per gallon or something like that. It's been a while since we've done it, but I wanted to start off with the show mead because it's the most base flavor, the most just typical mead. And the other flavors that I brought with me, we have ones that are all inspired off of the various Hogwarts houses. So we have a Ravenclaw mead that is brewed with butterfly pea flower to try to get a slight blue tint, as well as some raspberry flavoring.
Okay.
We have a Hufflepuff mead, which is made with banana flavor and chocolate flavor.
Ooh, okay.
We have a Gryffindor mead, which was brewed in secondary fermentation, which we can talk about what that means in a bit. But in second fermentation, we put in apples, as well as put in cinnamon, and then put a tiny bit of oak barrel aging flavor into that too. So it's a little bit more of, a lot of people compare it to kind of a whiskey style.
Okay.
But it's not nearly as strong as a whiskey would be. And then the Slytherin mead is, we heard about this flavor on the internet, and we were like, that sounds weird. But everyone on the show that we were watching them make it in was like, this is actually really good. Like, this is surprisingly good. And it's the only ingredients that we added to it are a little bit of green food coloring to give it a slight tint, and spearmint.
Oh, okay. Cool. Yeah, so if Haley was here, HPR from the Discord, she'd be really stoked because she is all about Harry Potter and stuff like that. So do you want to go ahead and give us a taste?
Yeah, sure.
Cool. All right. Cheers. This is going to be good. Oh, man, that's tasty. That is really good, Joe.
I appreciate it.
Yeah. All right. So this one you call a show mead.
Show mead.
So why do you call it a show mead?
A show mead is basically, I don't know why it's called that specifically. It's been a long time since I looked that up. But all it means is that the only ingredients that were used to make it were honey, water, and yeast. There's nothing else in it. It's just the base mead at its sole components. Nothing added to the process. So
Okay.
I don't remember exactly why it's called that, but I assume it would be something along the lines of, if you were comparing different brewers' show meads, they were all told to use the same ingredients for something, then this would be like the basis or something like that. I don't know.
No, that makes sense. So this is kind of like your baseline mead, something that is, I guess you would say, traditional. Like that's a traditional mead.
Correct.
Okay, right on. Cool deal. Yeah, so let's go ahead and try the other ones. And I also didn't ask you, what kind of equipment do you need to make mead?
You need carboys, which are containers that are either made of glass or plastic that either you can do the primary fermentation and secondary fermentation in, or you need a bigger unit, like a stainless steel, like brewing chamber, which we have. We have I think it's listed at 15 gallon, but we don't typically go over like 12 because we don't want it to overflow by any means. But it's something that you have to make sure to maintain clean between each use, so it doesn't get tainted or doesn't introduce unnecessary agents that mess with the flavors. And then after you do the primary in a big batch like that, you would split it up into the carboys to be able to do various different things with the same base batch.
Oh, okay, gotcha. So while you're getting that one out, I do have another question. So whenever you make the meads, like you're talking about the different Harry Potter ones that we're gonna be trying today.
Yeah.
Are they all from this mead, or do you brew it differently?
We did a different batch for that one. So this one was part of our third group of meads that we made. We originally had brewed 3, and one of them we just had leftover honey, and we're like, it's not as much honey as we'd been using for the other 2 batches, but we wanted to, use everything we had. So we made this one. It was not as sweet. And it was funny because since we were not investing as much into it, we called it the stepchild mead.
Oh, gotcha.
So
okay.
It's the one that's just like, whatever. Screw it. That's the stepchild, whatever. If it gets messed up, it gets messed up. And funny enough, it's the only one that didn't spoil. So
gotcha.
the other 2 that we made in that batch were a cranberry pomegranate, which before spoiling, it was amazing. And then we made a blood orange and dates mead, which was definitely interesting. My favorite was the pomegranate cranberry, but both of those ended up spoiling. We left them in one container for too long. They started growing mold, and we were like, let's just toss this out.
Gotcha. So what's this next one that you're pulling out?
I don't know. What is your Hogwarts house?
I actually think I'm either a Ravenclaw or a Slytherin.
Okay.
So let's do Ravenclaw.
Let's start with Ravenclaw. So
those colors are so pretty, dude.
It turned out green because of the butterfly pea flower. We put it in secondary when we should have put it in the water in primary, and then it would have been more blue. But it ended up turning green because we put it the butterfly pea flower in secondary. So let me take that off. We'll toss that. Sorry, I'm turning away from the mic.
Oh no, you're good, dude.
And
this looks fun. Okay.
I bought this specifically for this because these corks that we use to do it crumble really easily, and so I wanted to get the air one.
Oh, nice. Okay.
There we go.
Very cool.
And so, it didn't do the crumbling part, and we don't have to try to strain it or anything like that. So definitely a positive to using the awkward pumping corkscrew, I guess is what it is.
Gotcha.
All right.
There you go, sir.
So
these colors are so cool, dude.
yeah, we had fun with them.
All right, and this is the Ravenclaw one.
Yes, so we brewed this with butterfly pea flower, which should give it kind of a rose hips type of flavoring, as well as some flavor, just like raw flavor for raspberry. So that'll probably be the strongest one.
Oh, this smells so tasty. Dude, that tastes like juice, and I mean that in the best way possible.
I appreciate it. When we first tasted this after it was done, we both agreed that we think it would be better if we used a drier recipe, so that way the raspberry wouldn't clash with the honey as much, because it is a very sweet mead, and we think that it would just synthesize better if it was a drier taste from the initial mead, and then the raspberry and the flower petal taste would come out a little bit stronger. But it didn't turn out bad. It's just, personally, from the Harry Potter meads, it's my least favorite.
Oh, gotcha. And what's your Harry Potter house? You're a Gryffindor, right?
No, I am a Hufflepuff.
Oh, you're a Hufflepuff. Okay, gotcha. Yeah, I took the Pottermore quiz a while back, and I think I either got Slytherin or Ravenclaw. I want to say Ravenclaw. And then next up, which one do we have?
Let's do Hufflepuff, since that's my house. So we've got the golden color. We didn't have to add any extra coloring to it because this is just the natural color that mead is, which was really cool. The chocolate flavoring did make it darker and it made more that gold color, so it's not as pale, which we really were pleased with that.
Okay.
So this one is also very, very sweet too. But considering the flavors are banana and chocolate, we think it works a little bit better than the Ravenclaw one. But it still, I think, could have been better if we didn't use quite as much honey.
Gotcha.
So there's that. Get the corkscrew back.
I will stabilize the table.
Yeah. So I'm sorry for all the popping that you're going to hear, guys.
Nice.
And then get the cork out of the corkscrew, and then we can move on. So I'm sorry I'm turning away from the mic so much.
Dude, you're good, man. No worries. No worries at all.
Let's get the next little cup.
These little cups are so cute. I'll show them to the camera. They're just little tiny shot glasses.
Little tiny solo shots.
Yeah. All right. So out of all the Harry Potter house meads that you have, which one is your favorite? Is it this one?
It's going to be either, honestly, Slytherin or Gryffindor. I mean, I like the Hufflepuff too, but again, I think it's almost a little too sweet. This is definitely what you would consider more along the lines of a dessert wine.
Okay.
It's very sweet, and because of the flavors that we used in it, it makes it even more so.
Ooh, if you smell it, you can kind of smell the chocolate and banana in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Dude, this is so cool, man. Like, I have like no skills like this, like whatsoever. I mean, like, I can tell you what tastes good, but I can't do any sort of brewing or anything like that. This is cool.
It's fun.
Oh, that's tasty.
Yep. Like that one quite a bit. All right, so I'm going to save what I think is the best for last, which I think the Gryffindor is honestly the best. So let's get Slytherin out next.
All right.
And this one is a nice green color.
Ah, that's so cool. Okay. It looks kind of like a port wine almost.
A little bit, yeah. There it is. I was like, what am I looking for again? So let's get the... Oh, no. I'm going to have to use the cutters.
Gotcha.
There we go.
Nice.
I'm prepared. Ooh, this one looks like it was put in a little bit crookedly, so let's hope that there's no issues with that.
Surely there won't be. Yeah, there it goes.
That one wasn't as loud of a pop. Thankfully, I assume it's peaking every time it pops.
Oh, no, it's all good, dude.
There we go.
This reminds me kind of like the YouTube show Hot Ones, except we're instead of eating hot wings, we're trying meads.
Yeah.
Which I'd rather be doing this than eating hot wings.
And we're probably both feeling fine now, but all of these are probably like between 14 and 16% alcoholic, so we might be getting a little tipsy by the end of the episode.
Hey, that's fine. That's fine.
So if we're a little silly, apologize.
No, I don't think we need to apologize for being silly. I think that's...
So this one is the one that's made with spearmint, which sounds strange, but as soon as like...
Ooh, it smells good.
As soon as it touches your lips, you're like, okay, those work a lot better than I assumed it would.
Okay.
So
okay, let's try
cheers.
This. Dude, that does taste good.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Which you wouldn't think because it's a mint with a sweet flavor, but
yeah,
it really does.
Yeah, that was delicious, man.
Okay, let's pop that in there. And get Gryffindor.
Nice. So this is the Harry Potter of the meads.
This is the Harry Potter. This one's the most complex in flavors because we put in apple, cinnamon, and oak barrel aging. So there's more flavors in this one than there are in the others.
Nice.
And honestly, I think it turned out to be the best one, and I think this is probably the one we nailed the most. If we were going to remake these, we would probably change it so that they wouldn't be the same base batch of mead, so that way we could make the Ravenclaw a little bit drier and maybe the Hufflepuff a slight bit drier, not too much though. Slytherin I think would work better about semi-sweet to dry. This one I think I would want to leave as is, if not maybe just a tiny bit. Like instead of super sweet, probably just a sweet mead.
Gotcha.
Ooh, this one's
there
stubborn.
It goes. Boom, big pop. All right.
There we go.
Yeah, okay, so this one you think is the best.
I do, and most people that I've done tastings with agree that this one's the best. We did add a little bit of red food coloring as well to kind of get that rubyish color.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm still on the
Oh,
table.
no, you're good.
And I will put the stopper in. Tried to color coordinate with the stoppers, but there's no yellow one. So
Oh, no. Okay.
Hufflepuff gets purple.
Gotcha.
Okay, so those are off screen now, and
All right.
cheers.
Cheers. Dude, I honestly couldn't tell you which one I like the best. Those were all delicious.
That one's changed in flavor, so it might have changed in aging a little bit because it's not as intense of an oak barrel. I still can sense the oak barrel quite a bit, but it's not as intense as it used to be. So I think that one's mellowed out with age, which I'm happy about.
Okay, cool deal. Yeah, so now that we're nice 5 shots deep, we can keep on talking about mead.
Yeah, and I will say I did bring a 6th bottle, but because that one requires heat and it's better served warm or hot, we decided not to do that one. Also, since I don't have another stopper that we can use for it, I didn't want to open it and be like, all right, Steven, we have to finish drinking this right
that'd
now.
be bad. I am such a lightweight, dude. Like, I'm going to be probably feeling this here in a few minutes.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I don't really drink a whole lot. For people who for people who know me, they know that I don't really like to drink, but mead is an exception. It's delicious.
And I'll go ahead and just tell you about that one. So that one was part of our first batch ever, or part of our first 3 flavors we tried. We wanted to try to make a butterscotch mead. That was the attempt, because we were like, what if we did something kind of inspired by butterbeer? Because we are Harry Potter fans, and that ended up leading into the idea for the house meads. But we wanted to try to do something kind of inspired by butterbeer a bit, and so the only thing we could figure out was you can buy butterscotch flavored oil, and you can do that with mead, but we couldn't get one as quickly as we needed to. So we're like, let's use pudding mix, butterscotch pudding mix.
Ooh.
We did that, and we put it in primary, which basically meant that the yeast was like, oh, this is just more sugar for us to eat. And so the butterscotch flavor is hardly there at all.
Oh, gotcha.
We ended up trying to put in a little bit of butterscotch oil later, but still it doesn't shine through at all. We also, since butterbeer was described in the book, at least in my mind, it was described as a warm drink. It made you feel warm and fuzzy a little bit. So we added some spices too. We added cinnamon and cloves.
Ooh, okay.
And when we first tried it cold, we were like, oh, this is a bit weird. It's not great. And then I was like, well, we were reading in our book, which we can talk about in a little bit, about a version of mead called a metheglin.
A metheglin. Okay, there's your word for the day. Metheglin.
Yep, metheglin, which is a mead that is spiced and typically served warm. And so we were like, since we use cloves and cinnamon, which are technically spices, what if we try to serve it warm? Because we didn't like it at all cold. And so we heated it up on the stove and served it, and it made it infinitely better. It made it so much more palatable.
Okay.
So I do have that bottle here, and I'm happy to leave it here, but I would say do not drink it cold. It will not be very pleasant.
Okay, gotcha. So how is making mead different than making wine or beer, or is it still kind of the same thing? Because for alcohol, everything has to ferment, right?
Correct.
Okay.
So it's definitely different from beer. It's closer to wine, and I'm starting to feel it kick in now. So
Same here. Yeah, I'm like, all right, let me just chill out for a second.
A little bit of loose now, but it is more similar to wine in that you combine the water and the fermenting agent, in this case honey instead of grapes, we actually use wine yeast. There are different strains of yeast that produce a certain amount of alcohol within drinks, and the one we used is typically used more for home brewing wine because it usually, once you get to about 14 to 16% alcohol content, it kind of hard cuts off. Even if you introduce more sugar, it won't produce much more alcohol content to the mixture. So that is the process for that. You can make stronger ones. You can make weaker ones. There are, I don't even know how many different terminologies off the top of my head there are for different types of meads, but I mentioned earlier, like show mead is a type of mead. A metheglin is a spiced mead that can be served warm or cold, but in this case, this one should be served warm. And then there are melomels.
Melomels. Okay, there's another word for the day.
It is a mead brewed with fruit in the secondary. That would be what the Gryffindor mead would be classified as, because we did put apples in it. And that's what we mainly deal with, because we did the cranberry pomegranate. We did the orange, blood orange date. We did one of our first batches was cinnamon peaches.
Ooh, okay.
We did a raspberry. Yeah, I think we did a raspberry mead. So that's a melomel. And I think that is the one that is easiest to do because literally after you do the primary fermentation, and I'll go ahead and explain what that means. Primary fermentation is usually just honey, water, yeast in the mixture, and you let it sit for like 2 weeks to a month.
Okay.
And it does the primary fermentation. And then you go through the process of what is called racking and re-racking, where you transfer it from one container that it's been in to a fresh, clean one. So you try to start filtering out the dead yeast cells and the dead particles and all that kind of stuff so you can make it clearer. And once it gets into the new container, that's when you can start secondary fermentation, where you can introduce things like fruits and other things to really impact the flavor. It might start the fermentation process up a little bit again, but usually in secondary fermentation, the primary is done. It's at the alcohol level it's meant to be at, or that the yeast has been basically biologically engineered to get at, and then it basically will just start taking on the flavor of those fruits. And so that's how you do the melomel process.
Cool, right on. So are different types of mead harder to make than others?
I would say yes. There are, because whenever we first started, we thought you had to put the fruit in the primary. And when we did that, the fruit flavors don't come out as much because the yeast feeds off of both the fruit and the honey, and all the sugar turns into alcohol, and not much of the fruit flavor comes out. But when you introduce it in the secondary, after it's done most of the fermentation process, it will pull out more of that flavor into the profile of the mead. It's also going to depend on the type of mead. A show mead is really not hard to do. You just basically have to do the primary fermentation and then re-rack over and over until you get to the point where it's looking clearer. It doesn't have sediment at the bottom, and then you need to let it age for 8 months to a year.
Oh, okay.
There are guides on the internet on how to brew mead fairly easily, doing just that process, and then the book we have that helped us figure out the other processes for different types of ingredients tells us how you go about the other different types of meads. There's also another type of mead that I did memorize for today called a braggot.
A braggot, okay.
It is basically a more beer style of mead.
Okay.
The best way I can put it is from what I read. You put about 50% mead that's already been brewed into mead and 50% beer that's already been brewed into beer into the secondary, and then let that mix together, and then it becomes a more beer style of mead. It's not as alcoholic, but it's more of a beer sessionable type of thing. It's not something that you would necessarily be like, all right, 2 glasses and you're going to be feeling good. It's going to be more like something where it's like, oh, I could probably have 4 and you're good.
Okay.
Because it's a less alcohol content. It's not as pure flavor, or how you put it, coarse. It's a little bit more coarse because it's made with beer, but it's a different kind. There's also ones where you brew them with like meads you can brew with chili peppers, so you can get some capsaicin in there. You can do a bunch of different things with mead. It's a lot of fun.
Gotcha. Yeah, and it sounds like it's a really versatile thing. Almost kind of like with beer, you can add in the different flavors and stuff like that. So basically, unlike beer, because like beer doesn't taste better as it ages. Like beer tastes gross if it's old. Yeah. So does mead taste better as it ages?
Typically, to a certain point. A lot of people, and I learned this just fairly like within the past 2-3 years. People are under the assumption that wine gets better infinitely as it ages. But there's actually, for a lot of commercially made wines, there's a hard cutoff point where basically if you wet it too long, it's just going to taste like vinegar. Oh, no. It's going to look gross. It's going to be just disgusting. I think I opened a bottle of like 1995 type of wine that my parents bought from the liquor store for like, I think back in the day, like $15 to $20, and it just tasted like vinegar. It was gross. There are wines. Whoops.
Oh, hang on, let me go see what the dogs are doing. Hang on.
Hey. Dog interruption.
Yeah.
It's okay, boys.
Okay, I think they're fine. I think they're just bored. So sorry, go ahead.
No, you're good. There are different types of wines that are meant to age for a long time, and they do get typically better with age. Those are typically the more expensive wines. So if you've ever seen like a bottle of wine that you're like, oh, I would never buy that in 100 years because it's way too expensive. Those are going to be more along the lines of a wine that can continually age more so indefinitely, still not indefinitely truly, but they can have a longer shelf life. I think meads typically have a very similar type of style to mass-produced wine. I think the oldest bottle we drank here was 3 or 4 years old.
Okay.
I don't know how much longer it would keep beyond that. I mean, it's still fine now. It'll probably still be okay for at least a month now that we've opened it. But if we had done this a year or two later, who knows what it would have tasted like.
Gotcha.
So mead does typically keep longer than beer, and you can probably make certain meads that would, age indefinitely and be tastier and tastier as longer it goes. But I think the ones that we've been making are more along the lines of, probably drink within the first 10 years after making it. If wait that long, if you wait 10 years, it still might be gross. Who knows? But
gotcha. Yeah, sounds good. So if somebody wants to start making mead, what are some resources they can use to get started?
So we really watched a YouTube group that documented their mead making process when we first started. It was a channel that is no longer they still have the channel, but the group and the business that was behind the channel is no longer existing. It's called The Creatures, but they documented their whole mead making process, which kind of inspired us a little bit. And then they recommended a book called The Complete Mead Maker by Ken Schramm. And we even bought that book. It was at the local homebrew shop. And we use that very heavily when we're making our own mead. And the local homebrew shop here in the Tulsa area is called High Gravity. They're super friendly, super nice people. I could not recommend them enough. If you explain what you're wanting to do, they would be happy to give you recommendations or be like, yeah, bring some down to the store once it's done, and we'd be happy to try it out and let you know.
Oh,
and
nice.
give you like tips and stuff. So they're a wonderful resource. And that's kind of, at least around here, there are usually homebrew shops in a lot of major cities. Funny enough, I know that there is a homebrew shop pretty close to NSU in Tahlequah because I've driven by it before whenever I've gone to Tahlequah.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
So
yeah.
they have one. I can't remember the name of it. I've never actually been in there, but they have a homebrew shop. So if there's a homebrew shop near you, that's going to make things a little bit easier because you won't have to order everything offline. You'd be able to go in store, pick it up, or even order it in store. It gets shipped there, and you don't have to pay the shipping, and then you come and pick it up when it's ready and pay whatever you need to pay. The nice other thing about High Gravity is not only do they do like selling of homebrew supplies, but they also do classes, so you can learn some of the process, some of the beginners of it, and you can sign up for those types of things. And they even have a whole second half of their store, which is their tap room, because they brew in-house too. And you can try the beers they make. They don't typically serve their meads and wines in the tap room, but you can still buy what they make, mead and wine-wise, on their homebrew side of the shop. And it has to follow, since it does sell liquor and alcohol, they do have to follow liquor store guidelines. So they're open usually Monday through Saturday. I don't know what time they open, but usually until 9 p.m.
Okay.
And then the tap room, since it's more of a bar, they close down the homebrew side of the shop, and they leave their tap room open, I believe, from about 5 p.m. till midnight-ish.
Okay.
Because you just go there because it's basically a bar.
Okay, right on. Cool deal. So I know for beer, they have a lot of different home brewing competitions. So do those exist for mead? And if so, would you want to enter your meads into the competition?
I haven't heard of any local mead ones. I'm sure there's some that are national, which would probably be harder to break into. I know I just within the past couple weeks learned of the Fellowship of Oklahoma Ale Makers, which is a
That
local,
sounds super cool. Sorry to interrupt. That
No,
sounds
you're
super rad. The Fellowship of Local Ale Makers.
of Oklahoma.
Of
Ale.
Oklahoma Ale Makers. Okay.
And I think their acronym is FOAM. They're FOAM. But they are not only a club that you can join, and the only reason I hadn't joined is because I didn't know it existed until like this past month, and I haven't homebrewed in probably at least a year and a half because of COVID, and because we were actually right before COVID, my homebrew partner and I were like, we want to try to make our first beer. And we bought the kit and we were going to do it. And we're like, let's start doing it on spring break when we both have a lot of time. And of course, spring break rolled around and COVID's a thing. So we had to put it on hold indefinitely. And now he's married and is expecting a kid. And I'm like, are we even going to be able to do this after COVID? If we do, it'll probably be wherever I end up getting my own place, because I wouldn't want to make them homebrew stuff with a child in like the next room, because we've been keeping in their spare bedroom, and their spare bedroom is now going to be a kid's bedroom. So
cool. Right on. So this is something that you and I talked about a little bit on Discord. So why is it illegal to sell homebrewed alcohol? Because if I can buy a gun from you with no background check, I should be able to buy alcohol from you. Like, to me, like that just doesn't make any sense, you know? And
I do agree to an extent. I do understand why a lot of the laws are in place that doesn't allow you to sell alcohol that's made at home, because you are selling a product that's meant to be consumed, that's meant to be imbibed, and there are health and like Federal Drug Administration like logistics behind that. You don't want to be brewing something and just sell it as is, because you don't have to track what's in it. One of the things that makes alcohol specific is at least my understanding, especially when it comes to mead, wine, beer, and all that kind of stuff, every type of alcoholic beverage you plan to sell commercially, you have to get the recipe approved by the FDA.
Okay.
So that way they can track and put it on like the bottle or the label what's in it. Because if we made a mead that had strawberries as one of the agents to flavor it, and someone's allergic to strawberries, and we're like, here's a bottle of mead, and someone buys it and they drink it and they die because they're allergic to strawberries, then, not only am I at fault because I failed to tell the person that, but a whole family's lost somebody that's important to them. So I definitely agree that a lot of those laws are in place to not only protect the consumer, but they're there to also protect the producer as well. However, I do think that a lot of other laws regarding home brewing is a little bit archaic here. Like, I think I remember when my friend and I were talking about at one point potentially starting our own brewery. I don't think we're going to do it at this point, but we're looking into some of the laws, and it has to be so many feet or so many yards away from a residential area. And we're like, why is that a thing?
Right.
That doesn't make sense to me. But I do agree with the like FDA standards and stuff like that. And I do agree with that. However, I also think that a lot of Oklahoma laws in terms of alcohol are very outdated, and they need to be updated. And luckily in recent past, we have had a lot of those things updated and changed, but there's still a little bit of ways to go.
Gotcha. Sounds good. So what kind of batches do you want to make in the future, and will they be inspired by their series? So, like, I know you personally are super into Pokemon. So, like, will you do like different meads like based off of Pokemon types, or?
That one I have thought about. I'm not even gonna lie, but it'd be harder to do, because how do you make a liquid beverage that's inspired by fire types?
That's a good point. Unless you just want to make a really spicy mead.
If we wanted to do that, it would have to be a metheglin, which is either served hot or one of the ones that are brewed with chili pepper, so it has a lot of capsaicin and is very spicy in general. But I have thought about that. We do want to revisit some of the ones we've already done. Like, we want to remake all the Hogwarts meads that we've made, but tweak the recipe so they're not from the same primary batch. But we want to, like I was talking about earlier, we want the Ravenclaw one to be drier so that the raspberry comes out a little bit more. And instead of using raspberry flavoring, we would want to use actual raspberries. But when we made it, the raspberries were not in season. So we're like, that's not a good idea. We want to retry the pomegranate cranberry, because that one was so good.
Oh, I bet.
We let it spoil, and that's on us. And so that's just the risk of some of the batches you do. We want to, we had talked about wanting to do beer and different types of beers. And from that, I wanted to make a braggot mead, the one I described that's more beer-like. So there are a lot of things I still want to try, but it's just going to depend on the nature of COVID and the nature of how my homebrewing partner, my friend, and his life is panning out, considering he's expecting a kid now. And I know that that's going to be his primary concern, and that's 100% should be his primary concern. So if we do more mead and stuff like that, I do want his input in all of that. But at some point, I think it's going to be like I do some meads on my own without his input, but I still want him to be part of the process because I know he enjoys it. It's a really fun hobby. It's very relaxing in a way, and it's a fun collaborative nature type of endeavor. So yeah, I do want to do that.
Cool. Right on. So before we head into Stevia sound off, Joe, is there anything else that you want to add about mead or the different meads that you've made?
I will say that if you've never tried mead, definitely do so. There are some great places that you can get mead in town. One of the most common commercially sold meads is Chaucer's. I think you mentioned earlier to me that you have had Chaucer's before. I have. It's definitely good. It's not bad at all. They have their show mead, again, honey water yeast, and they have their raspberry mead. There's some other companies like the Moonlight Meadery. They don't sell as big of bottles, and they're still the same price as like one of the bottles that I brought today. So they're a little bit pricier. They're still good, but it's just, is it worth it? Because it's in like the same size as like a slightly bigger beer bottle.
Okay.
And then there are, I don't know if you've heard of the Route 66 vineyards in Oklahoma.
No, I have not.
There's I think it's called Route 66, but there's a vineyard in Tuttle, Oklahoma that they make their own wine, and they do put out a couple of batches of mead every year. They have a wildflower honey mead, and they have a orange blossom honey mead. And orange blossom honey, it has a slight citrus note. So there's different types of honey you can even do that will change the flavor profile.
Okay.
We've looked into a bunch of different types of honey that you can do. And my friend that I homebrew with, he actually knows somebody who has I believe a eucalyptus farm in Australia.
Ooh,
and
okay.
If we wanted to, we could basically get eucalyptus honey and see what that would taste like. And you can do like... I'm just trying to think of the different types of honey because there's so many. There's like sagewood, there's traditional honey, there's clover, that's the traditional. There's wildflower, there's orange blossom honey, there's I forget. There's something it has a slightly sour note to it. I forget the name of it, but different types of plants produce different types of honey. There's even an apiary, which is a bee farm in California that has been able to teach their bees how to make honey from marijuana plants.
Oh, okay.
Obviously, we wouldn't be able to do that here because they'd be like, "Oh, there's marijuana in it." Oklahoma, no.
Right.
But
medicinal mead.
If we were ever able to do that legally, that would be something really cool. The other issue with that, though, is because it's such a niche product, and not very many places in the U.S. can even make an apiary for. Based off of marijuana, and because it's just so hard to train bees to be able to make honey off of that stuff, like a 10-gallon bucket of their honey costs something like $600.
Oh, wow.
So it's like, I don't know if that's worth doing like a fun batch for.
Right.
So, but there are so many different types of honey that you can play around with, and that will change the flavor in and of itself. And we want to be able to do that because all we've ever been able to use is clover honey and wildflower honey. And there's nothing else that we've been able to do. High Gravity does sell like orange blossom honey. It's a little bit more expensive, but I've had orange blossom mead. It's so good. It's probably my favorite type of mead. Okay. So if you've never had mead, definitely try it. There are probably going to be at least one or two types of bottles at a liquor store, especially in the Tulsa area. I go to Park Hills for a lot of my wine and beer, and I know that they sell Chaucer's mead, and they've sold Moonlight Meadery in the past. There's one that a meadery that's in Colorado that I think I've been able to get a couple bottles for. And then I've also been able to find that Route 66 Vineyards meads at a couple of local stores too, because it's a local business.
Yeah, and I would definitely recommend everybody to try mead. I mean, it's just something that I feel like here recently has become more popular, and you're just now able to actually find it. So I think it's something that for sure that everybody should be able to try at least once.
Yeah, and actually that just reminded me, they don't sell it at liquor stores, but there is a distillery company here in Oklahoma called Oklahoma Distilling Company, and it's actually located in downtown Tulsa. They make their own like rum and vodka and whiskey and all that kind of stuff on there, but they also have a meadery that's called the Angry Bear Meadery.
Oh, okay.
And it is housed within the same facility, and I think they've been closed because of COVID, but once they open up, I've had their mead before. It was they make I think it was made with hibiscus.
Ooh, that sounds good.
It was a little bit sour, but it was good. And once they're fully operational again, they can open up their tap room again. I'm sure that they would love anybody to come by and try their not only mixed drinks made with their distilled liquors that they make, but also the meads that they brew as well at Angry Bear, which is their sister company owned by the same person. And the reason I know about that company is because I worked with somebody back at TCC when I was in testing, and her husband is the one who started that company.
Oh, right. Okay.
So yeah, I've been able to keep in touch with them, and before COVID, I even got to go down there and try some of the mead. It was really good.
Oh, nice.
I would definitely recommend them once they're fully operational again. I know for the most part, when COVID first hit, they really changed their production from distilled liquor to sanitizer, because they were like, sanitizer is alcoholic in nature. We can just repurpose our stuff and make sanitizers so we can give that to frontline workers, to hospitals, to various different entities. And I was like, the fact that they did that, I was like, that's awesome. They didn't want to just be like, well, we're going to keep doing what we do and just try to sell it more to different liquor stores. They're like, we want to use our equipment to better the cause. And I was like, that's amazing. So shout out to Oklahoma Distilling Company and Angry Bear Meadery.
Yeah, that is awesome, for sure. And so we're going to go ahead and head into Stevia Sound Off, which is a section where Team Stevia sends us questions and takes, good or bad, we don't care. And as long as they're within reason, everybody on the show will answer them. We post a weekly thread on our Instagram story and our Twitter, and we have a dedicated channel on our Discord for this section. So in the mailbag this week, we actually have 3 questions from JTag and 1 from me, so we're stoked about that. So since we didn't get to do Stevia Sound Off last week, we'll do it. We'll do the ones from last week today. So what really grinds your gears is the first question that JTag asks.
What really? There's a lot, but I will just go with my like general pet peeve that I typically go with. And every time I list it, people like make a joke whenever I list it. I hate being interrupted. And usually when I say that, people be like, oh, and then try to interrupt me intentionally.
Oh, no.
And I'm like, why would you do that? But I don't like being interrupted. I am the youngest child in my family, and growing up, the youngest child was always the one that was interrupted, because when you're little, it's like, oh, they don't have anything worth to say. So as you grow older and you understand that that's why you were being interrupted, you're like, I have valuable things to say now. So I hate being interrupted. Furthermore, I think it's just a disrespectful thing. Like you're almost implying that what you have to say is more important than the person you're interrupting, and I think that's just a rude nature thing in general.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good one. Mine for sure is whenever people are like, hey, we need to talk. And then you say, about what? And then you say, oh, I'll tell you later. And then that's just, to me, that really grinds my gears, because then I have to worry about it until later, which is oftentimes, hours away.
Absolutely.
And a lot of times it's not even like a big deal for what I want to talk about. So it's like stuff that I worry about that I shouldn't have to worry about. So that's for sure mine.
Yeah, absolutely. I can agree with that.
Yeah. And then next up, this is a really good one. So who would you want to be cast as Wolverine if Hugh Jackman doesn't reprise the role? And the background on this is they're actually doing a new X-Men, correct?
I think so, and I think that they're going to be introducing it in terms of, it's still technically owned by Fox, but since Fox is owned by Disney and Marvel is owned by Disney, it's going to be the official X-Men that's going to be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. That's my understanding, at least.
Okay.
And there were talks that Hugh Jackman wants to reprise his role as Wolverine at least one more time in order to be part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I would definitely be okay with. I think Hugh Jackman was an amazing Wolverine. But as someone who, I never read the comics growing up, but I read a lot of the lore on the internet about the comics. Wolverine, originally written, is supposed to be 5'3".
Right. He's not very tall.
He's not 6'2" like Hugh Jackman is.
Right.
So personally, if they recast Wolverine, I would want it to be someone who's more that original height and build profile. Wolverine is 5'3" and something like 260 pounds, but you have to remember that he's not overweight. He has metal that coats his entire skeleton.
Right.
So a lot of that weight is that metal, but he's whenever I think of Wolverine, I think of a traditional like gymnast. If you are familiar with what a gymnast looks like, they're usually not super tall and they're very broad, stocky people. I've actually known a couple of gyms throughout my life, and they fit that height profile. They're not super tall. They're like maybe 5'6", usually at the from what I've met, and they're broad, strong people that have really strong core muscles and just overall in really great shape. But I think Wolverine should be cast as more along the lines of his original height profile because in tandem with a lot of what people are talking about in regards to body positivity and saying, you know, big is beautiful and they're crazy unrealistic standards for women. And I agree with that sentiment 100%. The same, not to nearly as strong of as nearly as strong of a notion, but the same can be said of men because
of course,
men in Hollywood are usually, you know, at least 6 feet tall and at least strong, ripped people. I mean, you've seen all the characters in the Marvel universe. The shortest one I think is Robert Downey Jr. But whenever he's in the Iron Man suit, that adds to his height. Right. And I think that they should focus on someone who's more along the height profile of Wolverine. I think I remember Lydia saying she wanted Henry Cavill, which I think would be still an amazing casting choice, but it'd be more along the same lines as Hugh Jackman. Tall, muscular.
Right. Dude's beefy.
Very, very strong actor, so I don't think it would be bad at all. But personally, I would want to see someone more along the lines of, and this one is the one that I go to just simply for the height factor, like Daniel Radcliffe. He's 5'4".
I think he'd be a good Wolverine. I think that'd be kind of like a wild card pick.
Exactly.
But it'd be a good pick.
The issue with, I think, him specifically is, he fits the height profile, but he's not a very stocky and muscular person. He'd have to bulk up if he were to do it. But I think he could do well, especially because I forget the name of the movie he was in, but where he was like an unhinged guy, and he from like I think he had like mental health issues, and he was very grizzled looking and was always threatening of people. I think he could make a really, really strong pick, and it would probably help further cement himself from being typecast as, oh, he's Harry Potter. It's like, no, he's the guy who does all these things now. Right. So I think he could be a good pick. I think, I can't remember some of the other ones that we talked about, but there was one that Lydia brought up in the Discord that would fit more the height profile because he was like 5 foot.
Was it Scott Eastwood?
It may have been.
Okay.
But there's some actor that a lot of people have been saying, in my opinion, he looks a little too young to be Wolverine, because Wolverine doesn't necessarily look old, but he also doesn't look like he's, 20 years old.
He doesn't look like he's Peter Parker.
No, exactly.
Yeah. Or was it Taron Egerton?
It was, I think, Taron Egerton.
Okay. Yeah, and I think he'd be a good cast for Wolverine, especially like a younger Wolverine. I don't really have a definitive answer for this, just because like I know Hugh Jackman does an amazing job as Wolverine, but I'm just not really good at like pulling up actors, like right now. But I do think either Scott Eastwood or Taron Egerton would be good, or even Daniel Radcliffe. I think he'd be a very kind of like whenever they cast Robert Pattinson as Batman, people at first thought, oh, this isn't going to work. He's the guy from Twilight, but then it turns out like whenever his trailer dropped, everybody was stoked about Robert Pattinson as Batman.
Or even when Heath Ledger was cast as the Joker. Right. Everyone was like, that's not going to work. And then he knocked it out of the park on it. Right. It's like, you can't judge an actor based off the past roles he's done. If they're a truly great actor, they can work. And I think that's true for anything. If they announced like tomorrow that Henry Cavill was going to be Wolverine, I would 100% be by that, because he's a great actor. He's done well as Superman, as The Witcher, and all these other roles. And I think he would be a very strong acting choice. However, I would personally just be disappointed because it's like, oh, there's another tall, beefy dude in Hollywood representing a character who's supposed to be 5'4".
Right. Exactly. All right, so that was a good question. And then the last one that you have is, who are your most wanted characters for the final two members of the Fighters Pass 2 for Smash Ultimate? Do you feel like those are realistic choices? If not, who would be more realistic to see? I think the last two are going to be Crash Bandicoot. I think that's a given. I think Crash Bandicoot at this point is going to be in Smash. And I almost want to say Master Chief will be the second one. Which is much more unrealistic than Crash Bandicoot. But
I think personally, my preferred two would be Crash Bandicoot 2. I've been a big fan of Crash growing up, as well as, and I'm part of this like minority of, or this very vocal minority of people, but I really want Geno in Smash.
I want Geno in Smash too, but I just don't think it's going to happen.
I do not think it's going to happen. So in terms of characters who I think is more likely to happen, honestly, I think Master Chief's more likely than Geno. I think that Dante from Devil May Cry or a Monster Hunter rep or any of these characters, I think Crash is a fairly solid pick because he has been coming back into the public zeitgeist a little bit more.
Right.
But I think that's still a little bit more of a far reach. There are rumors that have been going around that in addition to the Fighters Pass, they're going to come out with one extra secret character based off of like data in the game, or from like the first Fighter Pass, one of the Mii costumes that they released right afterwards was part of the Fighters Pass like group a little bit. It was taking up the next like character slot.
Oh, okay.
For this Fighters Pass, there's actually another slot that is not occupied by the equivalent Mii fighter from the first one. So like I think it's something like I can't remember who it is, but there's a certain Mii fighter costume that is included in Fighters Pass 2 that is kind of a big deal and I forget who it is because it's not a big deal to me. But their character data in the game is 2 spaces after the final fighter in the pass, whoever it's going to be.
Okay.
And so everyone's like, well, what's that character space in there? So it's either going to be another Mii costume that we are unsure of, or Nintendo's going to be like, we're not doing a whole nother Fighters Pass, but here's one more character to round it all out.
Right.
And honestly, if that's the case, I think that final character will be a Nintendo IP.
I think so too.
But I think for the Fighters Pass, they are going to focus more on third party because that's been the general consensus, with the exception of Byleth and Pyra and Mithra. Although Pyra and Mithra are Nintendo characters, they're from a Nintendo exclusive series, they're still from a studio that was originally outside of Nintendo.
Right. Right. And that's a really good point. I mean, and I think that Geno is going to be a hard one, or I think another one that might be kind of on the realm of possibility is Sora from Kingdom Hearts.
Maybe. I've heard that Disney's really not wanting to play ball on that.
Which is sad, but
it really is.
Yeah.
What I would love to see is, final 2 characters. Most realistic thing in my mind would be Crash, maybe either Master Chief or Devil May Cry Dante or Monster Hunter, some of those characters. But then if they do come out and they're like, we're doing one more character, and they just decided, to heck with it, Waluigi.
Yeah, of course, right. Make everybody happy with Waluigi. And then the last question we have for Stevia's Sound Off is from me, and that is, who is your favorite butt rock band? So for those of you who might not know, butt rock is a genre of music that if you like butt rock bands, there's absolutely no problem with that. I'm not here to disparage your music tastes, but they're on stations that say, we play nothing but rock, butt rock, butt rock. And then it's just it's bands like Shinedown, Stain, Nickelback, Creed, bands like that. Again, no problem if you like those bands. We all have bands that we like that might not, be the most musically talented, but that's okay. And mine for sure is Avenged Sevenfold. That's my favorite butt rock band.
Yeah, I think mine would be, and this is pulling back to the almost antithesis of what people assume is butt rock, is the band that does much of the Sonic franchise's music, Crush 40. I don't care if their lyrics are not very, they don't make sense put together. It sounds cool, and it's fun, and it reminds me of playing Sonic Adventure 2, Sonic Adventure, and to a lesser extent, things like Sonic Heroes. And even though a lot of those games are not good, and I understand that, I had fun playing them, and the music, whenever you're 12, 13, you're like, oh, this is awesome.
Right. No, I totally agree. Yeah, Crush 40 is a good band, but they are kind of butt rocky.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, Joe, thank you so much for being on the show again. We really appreciate you. Really love the meads. I think my favorite one was either the Ravenclaw one or the Gryffindor one. Those were my two favorites. They were all great though. Don't get me wrong.
I appreciate that.
Yeah, they were all really good, but I think those were my two favorites if I had to pick. So Joe, thanks again for being on. And today you can follow us on all the social media platforms with the handle at the Stevia Show. Be sure to subscribe or follow the podcast on whichever podcast app you listen to. If you're on YouTube, search for the Stevia Show and subscribe with the notification button. And be sure to check out our streams. We stream at least once a week. Streams can be found on twitch.tv/lidwins and twitch.tv/STVN92. Follow us on social media to find stream schedules, and Anchor and Patreon producers are able to join in on multiplayer streams as well. And the local music showcase is coming back. I'm very excited about that. We're either going to be playing Smash Bros or Mario Kart. I'll probably have a vote for that, but we will be bringing that back. And we also have merchandise available through our links in our bio and our show notes. So whenever you visit us online, check out our link tree and click on merch, and we ship nationwide as well. And thank you again to the following for supporting the Stevia Show. Today's episode is brought to you by Bravado Wireless. Bravado Wireless is your go-to when it comes to all things connected. Now that spring has entered the chat, it is time for some spring cleaning, and that might mean it's time to upgrade that old phone. Starting on April 15th, you can get half off a brand new iPhone 12 or Samsung S9 for new customers as part of our new premium data plan. For more information, call your local Bravado Wireless store or head to bravadowireless.com. And we are also sponsored by community members like you. Remember, you can support us on Anchor or Patreon for as little as 99 cents a month, and we really appreciate it. But again, thank you, Joe, for being on. We had a great time with the mead. Hopefully people learned something. I know I for sure did, because of the whole like fermenting and second fermenting processes. It was cool learning about all of that. We really appreciate it. But for now, this is Steven.
And this is Joe.
And we will see you all later. Bye.